Dear student, my name is Roberto Osti. I will be your instructor for this drawing class, right? So my name, Roberto Osti. So in this video, I will discuss two essential methods for drawing, right? One is the structural drawing. And the other one is the tonal drawing. Right? So for this class, you will need, for now, only a pencil, right? A color pencil or a graphite pencil, paper, any piece of scrap paper, sharpener, and erasers, right? The eraser I use are kneaded eraser, and or any kind of eraser will do, right? So it's pretty simple now, because what I want to show you now is really the two essential methods of rendering anything when we draw, right? Rendering means also analyzing, right? How I look at the subject and how I render it. So clearly the structural drawing refers to the structure of the object, right? Meaning it's a three-dimensional characteristic, the form, the curves, the angles, the volumes, and all these things, right? The tonal drawing instead refers to, is concerned with the light, how the light hits the forms. And so let's see, drawing is going to be structure, right? And this tonal drawing is going to be the light on the form, light on form, right? So with that, I'm going to prepare a few demos that you want to follow along with me. And I'm going to start with drawing cylinder using the structural method. And then I'm going to draw a sphere using the tonal method of drawing. And we'll see what the defining characteristics and method techniques for each method are, right? So imagine now that I have a cylinder, right? So I draw my cylinder. So of course you draw along with me, right? And you can stop the video whenever you want, catch up, start it again. Right? Elliptical shape in here, right? I'm gonna have my little cylinder here, right? And to understand this method of structural drawing, I had to understand how to analyze the structure, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a cross contour line, right? So we go back to this structural drawing, right? Cross contour. So the cross contour line, imagine a topographic map, right? Topographic map would kind of gives you lines of the kind of slice the mountain at a certain level and tell you from this height, this line here correspond to the height of, I don't know, 1,200 feet or something like that. A little bit lower in, 1,100, etc., etc. So we're gonna do the same on the cylinder. We're gonna slice the cylinder like a salami, right? A salami, different slices here, and these slices are gonna give me the line of contour of the form, and this line goes across the form. That's why it's called cross contour, right? So I keep cutting. It's like a CAT scan, but you don't see the slicing here. You'll see the line of section of the CAT scan, right? So you imagine now you have all these lines that cut through the form, and then visualize the outlet contour, right? How the cylinder is curving, right? Because the cylinder could be, maybe there's a dent in here, right? There's a dent in here, and then the cylinder will do this, right? Dent, oops, dent, right? And here now the dent is a little bit smaller, right? And then disappears, right? Or in here now, same thing, right? A little bit smaller, and then disappears. So there's a dent in here in my cylinder, right? So, but this is the cross contour line, right? So now this cross contour line is kind of good for telling me the volumetric characteristic of the subject, but artistically speaking is kind of dry, right? So what I want to do, I want to find a way to render my cylinder in a more interesting way, right? So I'm gonna redraw the cylinder, right? So you notice that for drawing this cylinder, I use the pencil in a different way. I hold the pencil in a different way, right? We can start about mark making also. So if I draw like this, I have a high precision, right? Because I really can control the line. I want to tell the line to do exactly, the line does exactly what I want it to do, right? But when I want to render many lines like this, so this way I have a high control over short lines, right? And I put them exactly what I wanted. But if I want to create an area of value that is flat, doing this could be, has two disadvantages. One is that when I do this, I put all the weight of my hand on the pencil, and the hand can be pretty heavy, right? And at the same time, because the pencil, see how it's angled, right? Only the little tippy tip touches the paper. So I'm gonna have very thin lines. Sometimes I want to have very thin line when I do detail, but if I want to cover big areas of values, right? I want to do this, meaning when I do this, I just put the weight of the pencil on the paper, and I just, hold it like this without pushing down, right? I don't need to push it. And then now I can create very, very faint areas of value, and this is going to be the marker we're going to use later on for the tonal rendering. But I can use this for mark making, line making for the structural drawing. Meaning, if I do this, right, when I draw like this, right, I don't use this joint. When I use this joint, what happens is the line is very short, right? It's precise, but it's short. And making a long straight line is difficult. Instead, if I use like that, if I do this, I use the shoulder joint, and the shoulder joint helps me in making straighter and longer line. Makes sense? So if I want to do a long straight line like this, it's going to be harder. It's going to be hard. It's going to be, I can do it, but it's going to be a little bit wobblier, right? Well, it came out pretty good, but this is much straighter, right? So now I draw this with the, I draw the side of the cylinder, unlike what I did for this cylinder here. And you see the difference. The lines in here are much sharper. They are straight too. I mean, been drawing for all my life. So, but it's easier if you do this, right? And in this case in here, the line is softer, it's straighter, but it's kind of fuzzier, right? So what I could do now at this point, once I blocked in these in terms of just visualizing my cylinder, if I want to have more precise mark, I go over it just gently with a kneaded eraser, right? And then I can redraw my cylinder, right? My cylinder with a simple line, more precise line. And I use the underline trace as guide, right? You guide my hand, right? So different ways of drawing, different way of mark making, right? Okay, so now what happened is, as I said, we have this cross contour drawing here, which is Interesting, but it's kind of dull. When I want to draw rendering, want to render something more artistically, then what I do is this. I create a number of lines in here that give me the sense of turning, but I don't need to draw the whole thing, because I'm thinking maybe, so this area here is going to be a little bit, it's turning away from me. So the curvature here is going to kind of really curve at the last moment at the margin here. As I come toward the peak of the cylinder, maybe here it's going to be a little bit lighter, right? A little bit lighter, right? And then I decide here, I leave it white, because maybe the light comes from here and there is no lines in there. I leave it white. So, but then I pick it up here again, right? So if I do this, see that I achieve a sense of turning of the form, but it's not as rigid as this, right? And because I also imply a little bit of the tonal, the value, how dark and how light it is, by making it dark lines, thinner lines, no lines, and starting the lines again. If I want to push more, even this sense of turning, then I can increase the number of lines in here like this, right? Make sense? So now, at the same time, what I've done, that I described the turning of the form, I also achieved 1, 2, 3, 4 values. See that value? Because this is darker, medium, light, brightest, and then back again. And I can keep going. I can keep going if you really want to push this idea of the tonal development, right? This more and more, right? Make sense? So now I feel the form turning. So now, one thing is very important. When you draw these lines in here, right? So see, with this line, I just started from the margin, go all across, and then get all the way to the other side. But in here, I want to think the same way, but draw differently. So if I cut my section in here, right? I start with the line here, right? And then what I do, I could maybe make it gradually get thinner. See that? So thick here, right? And thinner. And from here, jump, and I let it go. And then leave this white area here, and then I go continue from here. The important thing is that when I do this, right? When I leave the white in here, there is continuity between this line and this line in here. Because that way, even if I don't have anything here, my brain tells me, hey, look, you know, this goes from here to here. I lose it, but I see it again here. So my brain connects the dots, right? Connects the dots. I can do this too, right? Here a little bit, and then here. I don't need to draw a lot, but you have to have continuity between these two lines in here. So when you start a line here, then you have to make sure that this line in here is connected with the other one. If in my cylinder, when I draw this line, I don't consider the section line, and I start doing this, right? Then my brain says, what is that? Hair? Grass? What is that? I don't understand. My brain does not compute, does not understand that there's a continuity between these margins here and this margin here, because there is no such a thing. So then I lose the sense of form, the description of the form. Keep in mind one thing, though, that I can use these lines not as structural line, but as tonal line, and I'm going to show you how to do it quickly, right? So this exercise should give you enough stuff to do for quite some time, right? So now, if I use this line here, I can do that, right? I can do this, right? But now what I'm doing, I'm not trying to replicate the structure. I'm trying to replicate the values, meaning I could put this margin here now, more packed together here, like this, right? It could be lines, it could be dots, it could be whatever you want. And as I do this, I'm going to have more marks in here, making it darker and darker and darker, like that, right? And then here, maybe fewer, right? Maybe fewer, and none here, and more here, right? Here. but makes sense. So I can still achieve a sense of volume, right? With, let's call them hairy marks, right? I'm just making it up, right? You could use stippling, like little dots, right? But it takes forever, right? The thing is this, that the structural approach is really important in because it makes you understand the volume, the volumetric aspect of your subject. So practicing drawing with this, it gives you a good, it teaches you how to handle the mark, the line, how to educate your hand to do what you want the hand to do, and appreciate the volumetric characteristics of the form. So it's a method of analysis of the form, right, of the subject. So now, structural drawing, right? So let's look now at tonal drawing, right? Tonal drawing, I'm going to get another piece of paper. Okay, so tonal drawing. Let's start with tonal drawing. I'm going to use a sphere, right? Again, as I said before, tonal drawing is concerned with light on form, right? Tonal drawing, light on form, right? So structural drawing, structure and line, light and form, tone, right? See how many things we start tacking to one method, right? Okay, so let's draw now. Let's consider this first. I'm going to show you a drawing that you can find in Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbook, because he came up with his studies, right? So I got my sphere, right? I got my sphere in here, and then I imagine now the light coming down from here, right? From the heavens, right? I got the light in here, and so what happened is here, the light will hit. So this is the light source, right? Okay. So the light will hit the form at this point in here perpendicularly, right? And at this point in here is the point that is the closest to the light source and is the most perpendicular. And that's typically is where we have the highlight, the white area, right? The highlight. So that's a highlight. As the light source in here kind of becomes a little more distant, right? And a little bit less perpendicular, right? So it's an angle here, narrower or wider than 90 degrees is developing here, right? And so on, right? Here. And then here it gets tangent, right? You get tangential to the form. So now, at this point in here, I have another value, right? At this point, I have another value. And then at this point in here, I have the passage from the light mass and the shadow mass, right here. This point in here is the tangency zone, okay? So the tangency zone, sorry, the tangency zone is the point where I had the patch from the light mass to the shadow mass, right? So all this area here will be darker, shadow, right? But at the tangency zone, I will have an area that looks a little bit darker by contrast. And I'm going to show you later on this idea of the contrast, the simultaneous contrast, right? So here now is the value, another value, right? Another value. So I would do this, put the value everywhere, and then gradually make it, skip down one step, make it a little bit darker, right? And then another step and make it a little bit darker. So now I have this passage, and then from brightest to gradually darker. At this point in here, I have the shadow mask, so that's going to be the darkest spot. But what makes it more clear that I'm passing from the light mask to the shadow mask here is the tangency zone. At the tangency zone, I'm going to have an area here which is a darker band, which I think is an optical phenomenon, right? This, right? And now, imagine now I have here the plane, right? The plane is here, right? My sphere is on the plane here on the table. The light comes down from here, so that this area here is going to be shadow, right? So the shadow is going to be here. Cast shadow. So this is the proper shadow of the form, and this is the shadow that the volume, the sphere, casts onto the table, right? But what happens in here, typically, when I have a surface like this, right, onto which the sphere is positioned, the light coming down like this will bounce back onto the area of the sphere that is in the shadow, and will create a slightly lighter area here past the core shadow, or the tangency zone, right? So tangency zone is also called core shadow, terminator. You just gotta pick one. You got so many names, but it's an area here between the light mass and the shadow mass that is a little bit darker, right? Like this. So now this light coming from up here bounces off the table and then hits the shadow mass here, creating a reflected light area. Okay, so now this is how the light behaves on a form, right? If I look at the cube also, then I'm going to notice another phenomenon, and in this case, I'm going to show you the so let's draw a cube, right? Let's draw a cube. Start with the straight line, the corner closest to me. From here, I'm going to make it with parallel, in axonometry, with parallel lines, not in perspective, right? I don't want it to be too, let's leave the perspective for later on, right? So this is parallel to this is parallel to this, right? Now this is parallel to this and is parallel to this, right? And then this, and this are also parallel, right? So I have my cube, right? And I'm saying, good, happy, did a cube today, right? So now, imagine this, imagine that the light hits the form from here, right? Like this. So, or let's say here, right? Let's see like this. So this is going to be the whitest area, right? The light area. This area here catches some light, but not as much as that, right? Because it's at an angle. And this area here is behind, so it doesn't catch any light. So what I want to do, I want to leave this white, and I want to put a value all over this area here, right? So look how I render the value, right? This is the tonal mark, right? And I'm gonna use another piece of paper before I start this, so you can follow me. You can follow me when I do this, doing the right mark, right? So when I do the tonal mark, right, I want to have the pencil sharp, always sharp, right? And you can use the pencil like this, like I showed you before. You start making lines as parallel as possible, right? One next to the other one. And you want to blend them. You want to blend the lines one with the other one so that they create a homogeneous area of value. It's homogeneous. I don't want to have lines that do this at this point, right? Because that's another type of thing, right? Either you know how to use these, like I showed you before with the hairy cylinder, or you're gonna make a mess with these. So don't do this for now. Do this. Try to maintain a regular pattern like this, and maybe before you start drawing, get a few pieces of paper and practice doing this type of marks, right? I would start doing straight lines and then curved lines and parallel lines, etc., just to educate your hand. So I have a homogeneous area of value here, right? And if I want to make it darker, what I do, I just maybe see from this angle in here, I change slightly direction, right? I change slightly direction here, right? And now I have another area of value on top of the previous one, which makes it slightly darker. And I can kind of soften it up, getting on one value, another value, and another value here, right? Until it can kind of get a gradation, right? A gradation that I can control as I like, right? So I'm gonna have this corner which is darker, and then it gets lighter gradually like this. So now, if you cannot achieve this level of homogeneity, this is the problem, right? I'm gonna show you the problem. So imagine this, I have now my cylinder here obtained with structural lines, right? Here, right? And now I've drawn my basic structure of the cylinder. Now I want to render it tonally, right? So what I do, let me start from the outside, and we see the effect that this has on the cylinder, right, as I go over it. When my tonal rendering is done properly, right, imagine I'm going over here, the tonal rendering becomes like a wash of watercolor. See that? I go over it, and I still see it, because the lines that I put in over here are not lines, are area of value, and they don't compete with these lines in here. But if over here I do that, right, I do this kind of marking here, right, see how quickly I lose it, right? I lose it, I don't see it anymore. So now I don't have my structure drawn anymore, and I don't know where to put my background value. See, this could be the background value, see? And then maybe I'm gonna soften the edge a little bit more here. Background value here, right? I lose the line now, but I now have the form defined by area of values rather than line. And in here I can gradually maybe kind of darken the values and achieve a sense of volume, right? Sense of volume. So let's go back to the cube, right? So in the cube I have white, medium, dark. And what I'm doing is now I'm going to block in the value here, the lightest dark value, if you want, right? All over the place. Here. I include also this is going to be darker, but I want to prep it with a overall value here, right? that now I can darken it right here. But see, my lines are not lines, are the tonal rendering that I showed you before, right? So now I have 1, 2, 3. See that this is not enough. I'm gonna push it darker, right? I want to push it darker, and I can push it dark as much as you want. So if you notice, this surface is a little bit mottled. It's because of the cardboard here. It has a little bit of texture, and I'm picking it up. So later I'm going to put the smoother piece of cardboard in the back. So the surface you draw on is very important, right? Now you see 1, 2, 3, but it looks a little bit, and then I can imagine now the like I'm from here, I can imagine now the shadow mask right here. Sorry, the cast shadow. This is the cast shadow. The cast shadow is the one projected on the table by my object, right? By my cube. Always layering, right? Always layering. I am a little bit looser now with the mark. You see spaces in between. But then later I mend it. I block it in. Also, I don't want you to go spend too much time watching me rubbing, pencil on paper. But eventually, see, we can smooth it fairly quickly, right? And obtain a sense of yet another value, right? But there's one thing that I want you to notice. It's see that 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Quickly, because I know how to relate these to each other, and then I can create an essential rendering of a cube hit by light. But there is a concept called simultaneous contrast, right? So what happened is this: if I have the light coming down from here, all this area here is white, is lighter, right? But when I get this area of light next to this area of shadow here, this area here, because of the contrast, the direct contrast with this area of light, this will look darker, right? Here, right? This will look darker. And then gradually it will become lighter, right? Same thing in here, right? Because this is lighter than that, there is going to be also an area that appears to be a little bit darker, right? But the contrast, the difference is not as much as here, because the contrast is higher. The contrast in between these two, because this is not as bright as that, is going to be a little less pronounced, right? And then, so now here we have, similarly here, this area here, because it's next to a dark area, this area here will look lighter than here. So this area here is going to be darker, right? It's going to create like a little bit of a glow, right? A little bit of a glow. And the same thing here, right? The same thing in here. So now let's see. This area here will look a little bit, because of that, darker, right? But not as much as this area here, because the contrast is not as much. This is not as dark as that, right? Makes sense? So basically, you end up with area that are not, area of value are not uniform, right? And now, this area here, likewise, is not going to be flat white, because the contrast. So this area here will appear lighter because they are next to darker areas, but this area here is a little bit darker, right? Now, think of this. Think if I include here the background here and make a dark background right here, then that area there is going to be also appearing a little bit lighter, and I'm going to have an area here which is a little bit darker because it's distant from all this background area. And so on. If I have in here a brighter, whiter background, that is going to be a little bit darker. Makes sense? So it's a contrast that you have between the various adjacent area that come in contact that will create this tonal variation in the various areas, right? So so I would like to take a break now, and then I'm going to prepare some exercises for you guys to do. I'll see you in a few minutes.